It's Christmas Eve in snowy 1800s London, England, and in a small house at the edge of town there lived a lonely 7-year-old girl named Isabelle. Isabelle was a sad child, with not a friend to her name. While most children were spending the time with their families and eagerly looking forward to opening the presents that were placed with care beneath a beautiful decorated Christmas tree, little Isabelle spent most of the holy night alone in her cold, dusty attic room. Isabelle's parents were very poor. Her mother was a strict crone of a woman who stayed at home and schooled Isabelle. Her father worked long hours down at the London harbour to support his family, although a large portion of his earnings went towards purchasing and consuming copious amounts of alcohol at the end of his shift. Sometimes he would come home drunk after being thrown out of every bar in London and shout at his beloved wife, Isabelle's mother. Occasionally it would escalate to violence and he would beat her savagely. Then, when he was done, he'd force himself upon her in a drunken sexual rage. As it so happens, this particular night was one of those occasions. Isabelle just remained quiet, quivering beneath her soiled bed sheets until the screams and loud bangs subsided. Once poor frightened Isabelle was finally able to fall asleep, she dreamed of what it was like to have a friend to play with, so maybe she could laugh and be happy like the other children of London. Luckily for little Isabelle, this Christmas Eve marked a big change, when her abysmal loneliness caught the attention of a guardian angel, who then crafted a very special gift for the sad little London girl. As the sun rose on that Christmas morning, Isabelle opened her eyes to find a strange wooden box sitting at the foot of her bed. With eyes wide and in awe, she stared at the colourful handcrafted box, wondering who had left it. She was not used to receiving gifts, especially toys. What little toys Isabelle did have were ones she had found abandoned in the street, or washed up in the gutters. Isabelle scooted up to the foot of her bed in front of the mysterious box and picked it up with both hands. The box was beautifully painted in colourful styles with carvings of happy clown faces on the side. There was a tag on the box that simply read, "For Isabelle." On the top of the box was an engraving in text. Isabelle squinted her eyes as she sounded out the words. Laughing Jack in a box. She paused. Laughing Jack in a box? Isabelle had heard of a jack-in-a-box, but never a laughing jack-in-a-box. Her mind spun with curiosity as she grasped the box metal crank. Isabelle turned the crank and the song "Pop Goes the Weasel" chimed in rhythm with the crank's gyrations. As the song came to its climax, Isabelle sang along with the verse, "Pop goes the weasel." But nothing happened. Isabelle let out a sigh. "It's broken." She placed the box back on the edge of the bed and shuffled across her small dusty room to her dresser, where she changed out of her soiled bedwear and into her usual tattered clothes. Suddenly Isabelle heard a loud rattling noise coming from the bed behind her. She spun around to witness the wooden box violently shaking. Then, without warning, the top of the box sprung open and a parade of colourful smoke and confetti bellowed out. Isabelle rubbed her eyes in disbelief of what she was seeing. As the smoke cleared, there stood a tall, thin, multicoloured clown man with bright red hair, a swirling rainbow-coloured cone nose, and feathery shoulders that sat atop his raggedy and colourful clown outfit. The Technicolor clown spread his arms and excitedly announced,
"Come one, come all, whether big or small, to see the best clown of them all, the one, the only, Laughing Jack-in-a-Box."
Isabelle's eyes lit up. Who are you? She asked. The colourful carney stepped down off the bed with a happy grin and said,
I'm glad you asked. I am Laughing Jack, your new friend for life. I'm magical. I never get tired of playing. I'm a whiz at the accordion, and I adapt and develop with your own changing personality. In other words, whatever you like, I like.
Isabelle looked up at the mysterious clown man. We're friends, she stuttered. Jack looked at the girl while cocking an eyebrow.
Friends? We're best friends! I was specially created to be your not-so-imaginary friend, Isabelle.
Isabelle's jaw dropped. You know my name? Jack let out a whimsical laugh.
Of course I know your name. I know everything about you. So, now that introductions are out of the way, how would you like to play a game of I Spy?
Isabelle grinned from ear to ear. Really? We can play games? I'd love to. She paused. I can't. I have to go downstairs to see Mother for homeschooling and chores. The smile faded into a look of disappointment. Jack placed his hand on Isabelle's shoulder and with a warm smile said,
It's okay. I'll be waiting right here for when you get back.
Isabelle's smile returned as she looked up at her new friend. Just then she heard her mother's shrill voice calling her from downstairs. Well, I gotta go. I'll see you after I'm done, okay, Jack? She said as she headed towards the door. Jack smiled.
Absolutely, kiddo. Oh, and Isabelle.
Isabelle looked back at Jack, who gave her a wink and said,
You should wear that smile more often. It suits you.
Isabelle grinned happily as she turned and walked out the door. All day Isabelle told her mother about the amazing, colourful clown man who came out of a magical box that appeared at the foot of her bed. Her mother, however, did not believe a word of it. Finally she persuaded her mother to follow her up to her room so she could behold Laughing Jack for herself. They walked up the stairs and Isabelle swung open the door to her room. See, Mother? He's right here. Isabelle paused as she scanned the room that contained neither magical dancing clown man nor mysterious wooden box. Isabelle's mother was not amused. She gave Isabelle a glare so menacing it made her knees weak and her stomach sick. But Mother, he was... Isabelle's mother delivered a swift, hard smack across her face. Her eyes began to tear up, and her lip began to quiver as she could feel herself about to break down. You stupid, insolent child! How dare you lie to me about such childish idiocy? Who would want to be friends with a useless worm such as you? You shall remain in your room for the rest of the evening and shall receive no dinner. Now, what do you say, you ungrateful wretch? Isabelle managed to swallow the knot in her throat in order to mutter a reply. Thank you, ma'am. Her mother glared down at her for a moment before leaving the room in disgust. Isabelle kneeled over, burying her face in the side of her bed. Streams of tears ran down her cheeks as she began to weep.
What's wrong, kiddo?
A voice called out. Isabelle looked over the edge of the bed where Laughing Jack was now sullenly sitting beside her. Where were you? Isabelle murmured. Jack ran his hand through Isabelle's hair to comfort her as he softly replied,
I was hiding. I can't let your parents see me otherwise. They won't let us play anymore.
Isabelle wiped the tears from her eyes.
Look, kiddo, I'm sorry I had to hide, but I'll make it up to you. Because tonight we can play games and have tons of fun.
Jack said, smiling. Isabelle looked up at her vibrant pal and silently nodded, as a little smile began to form in the corners of her mouth. That night, Laughing Jack and Isabelle played so many fun games. With a wave of his hand, Jack made all of Isabelle's tin soldiers spring to life and march around the room. Isabelle was amazed as she watched her toys move around the room on their own. Then, Laughing Jack and Isabelle told each other spooky ghost stories. Isabelle asked Jack if he was a ghost, but Jack explained that he was more of a cosmic entity of sorts. At the end of the night, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out an assortment of delicious candy. Isabelle was in ecstasy when she popped the first colourful treat in her mouth, as it was her first time tasting something so sweet. Isabelle had so much fun and laughed so hard that night that things seemed to be finally looking up for little Isabelle. At least, until the incident that occurred 3 months later. It was pleasantly warm and sunny in London that day, which was a bit of a rarity, so with the help of a certain not-so-imaginary friend, Isabelle was able to finish her chores early and was allowed to go outside and play for a bit. Things started simple enough. The duo were back behind the house playing pirates when Isabelle spotted the neighbour's cat sneaking into the garden. "Yar! We've got an enemy spy off the starboard bow," Isabelle yelled, captivated by fantasy and imagination.
"Yo-ho! I'll get him, Captain Isabelle!"
exclaimed First Mate Jack in his best hearty pirate accent. Laughing Jack's arm stretched out across the garden and snatched the unexpecting feline, who began to struggle quite vigorously. "Don't let him get away, Jackie, or I'll make you walk the plank," Isabelle antagonized. Jack's grip on the cat tightened, and his arm grew and extended like anacondas wrapping themselves around the wily feline as it struggled for dear life. Jack's arms just kept squeezing the animal, pressing the air out of its lungs. As the once dear house pet's eyes began to bulge out of their sockets, there came a loud snap. Jack quickly released the creature from his grasp as its lifeless furry husk thudded against the ground. There was hushed silence as the two observed the cat's now twisted and mangled corpse. The silence was finally broken by an uproarious laughter coming from Isabelle. "Wow, I guess cats really don't have 9 lives," Isabelle exclaimed, nearly teary-eyed from laughter. Laughing Jack began to chuckle as well.
Yeah. But won't you get in trouble if your mother finds out your neighbor's cat is dead in her garden?
Isabelle's laughter quickly subsided. "Oh no, you're right. I'll just throw it back into the neighbor's yard." Isabelle panicked as she grabbed a nearby shovel and scooped up the broken cat cadaver before lobbing it over the fence back into the neighbor's yard. They quickly went back inside and up into Isabelle's room. About an hour later it came, the ear-piercing squawk of Isabelle's mother shrieking her name from downstairs. Neither Jack nor Isabelle said a word as she crept down the stairs alone to face whatever horrible fate was coming to her. Jack could hear much yelling from downstairs, but couldn't make out what was being said. After about 30 minutes, a teary-eyed Isabelle ascended the stairs back into the room.
"Well?"
Jack asked nervously. Isabelle just stared at the ground as she spoke. I tried to tell her it was you who hurt the cat. She didn't believe me. Said you weren't real." Jack frowned, knowing this was all his fault. Isabelle used her sleeve to wipe away her tears. "I'm being sent off to a boarding school. I'm leaving tonight, and you can't come with me." Laughing Jack's face turned to shock.
"What? I can't come? But where'll I go?"
Isabelle said nothing but pointed over at the beautifully covered box from where her friend had originated.
"Back in there? But I won't be able to get out until..."
Jack paused. Isabelle looked up at her only friend with tears streaming down her face. "Jack, I promise I'll come back for you as soon as I can." Jack looked at the box, then back at Isabelle.
"And I'll be right here waiting for you, kiddo."
Jack smiled as a single tear ran down his cheek. He walked over to the box and with a puff of smoke was sucked back in, unable to be free until once again opened. That night, Isabelle was sent off to boarding school. For the first time, Laughing Jack felt what it was like to be lonely. Even when trapped in his box, Jack was able to see the things going on around it. So each day he waited for his friend to return, and each day the room grew older and dustier. Laughing Jack's one purpose was to be Isabelle's best friend for life, and now he waits day after day, month after month, to reunite with his special friend. Isabelle's parents still lived in the house, but never came to the upstairs room. The only time they made their presence known was when Jack could hear them fighting. Still, Jack's life became one of solitude, loneliness, and disappointment. As years went by, Jack's once bright, vibrant colours began to fade into a monochrome blur of pitch-black void and stark white emptiness, trapped all alone, eternal and hopeless. 13 years passed until the night Isabelle's father came home partially drunk and got into an argument with his wife as per usual. Things escalated to physical violence once again. However, this time she didn't get back up. Isabelle's father had beaten his wife to a dead, bloody pulp and was sentenced to hang at the gallows the next day. With both her parents dead, this meant that the now 20-year-old Isabelle inherited the dusty old house she spent the early half of her childhood in. Laughing Jack was quite surprised when he heard his old friend's footsteps walking up the stairs to the attic room for the first time in 13 years. However, it was not the reunion Jack had hoped for. Isabelle looked different. Not only was she older, but she also seemed to possess this odd, grim look on her face. No longer was she the hopeful and curious young girl Jack first met all those years ago. Jack eagerly awaited Isabelle's releasing him from the prison he had waited in for so many years. But still Jack's box sat there untouched and unnoticed on a shelf in the corner of the room with all the other dusty unwanted knickknacks. Isabelle had completely forgotten about her old friend, dismissed as some sort of early childhood fabrication. Surprisingly, this made Laughing Jack feel nothing. He was hollow. 13 years of waiting and disappointment left the monochrome clown void of sorrow and self-pity. Jack remained in his box, colourless and without emotion. The next day, Isabelle went off to work at her job as an upholsterer, doing furniture repairs for the good people of London. Jack waited in captivity. Hours later, a drunken Isabelle returned home and stumbled upstairs to her room, but this time she had a friend with her.
Who is this? A new friend?
It was a lady friend Isabelle had picked up at the bar earlier that evening. She was beautiful, with flowing blonde hair, sapphire blue eyes, and a smile that could make hearts melt. Laughing Jack's attention was drawn to Isabelle's guest.
Why does Isabelle need new friends? I thought I was Isabelle's only friend.
Jack thought to himself from within his hellish confinement. Isabelle and her lady friend sat down on the bed and chatted about life in London. Isabelle made a joke about the weather, and they both laughed. Laughing Jack hissed with envy over Isabelle's new friend. Isabelle and the girl looked deeply into each other's eyes as they leaned in for a kiss, locking lips with a passionate swirl of tongues in one another's mouth. Jack was perplexed by this strange display of affection, for he had never seen kissing before. As the kissing grew more intense, Isabelle ran her hands along the girl's smooth thigh and up her dress. However, her guest just brushed her hand away. Isabelle was persistent though, and once again ran her hand along her smooth thigh and up her skirt, this time placing her hand upon her silky undergarments. The woman took great displeasure with Isabelle's sexual advancements and pushed Isabelle away before delivering a hard smack across her face. Isabelle's eyes darkened as she glared at the woman. Her once drunken passion turned into booze-fueled anger. The woman's heart sped up as she saw Isabelle's face boil with rage. "Stupid!" whore!" Isabelle yelled as she smacked her fist into the girl's face. Laughing Jack's eyes widened as he witnessed the long streaks of red liquid gushing from the girl's nose. He thought his eyes aversion to such violent sights. Isabelle firmly clutched the girl's wrist with one hand as she tore her panties off with the other. The terrified girl tried to fight back, but Isabelle was overpowering her. She roughly fondled her breast before savagely grabbing her hair and forcing her tongue down the sobbing young woman's throat. He responded by chomping down as hard as she could on Isabelle's tongue. Jack watched with wide and curious eyes as his old friend released her new playmate and clutched her mouth as it filled with warm red blood. The frightened girl fell off the bed and dropped down on the floor as she scurried towards the exit. Isabelle quickly lurched forward and was able to catch her fleeing plaything by the end of her dress. Reaching back, she welded a lead candlestick off the nightstand beside her, and with all of her might bashed in the back of the young woman's head, which burst open like a ripe watermelon. Thick blood splattered across the room as the girl's body convulsed on the ground for several seconds before going completely still. Blood was everywhere. Some droplets even managed to get on Laughing Jack's box, who was now very much enjoying the show. For the first time in 13 long years, a smile began to creep along Laughing Jack's face, and all of a sudden a chuckle escaped his cold lips, and then another, and another, until Jack was cackling and howling with laughter from inside his sealed box.
What a wonderfully fascinating game,
Jack thought as he watched the motionless girl's golden blonde hair flow red with blood. As the adrenaline began to mellow, Isabelle realized she had to dispose of the body. She picked up the girl's lifeless corpse and plopped it on the bed. She then left the room, closing the door behind her and locking it before leaving the house. She returned almost a full day later and re-entered the home, bringing with her a metal garbage can and her bag of upholstery tools from work. She then cleared everything off the wooden desk on the wall opposite to the door, then dragged the bed with bloody corpse into the middle of the room. This not only gave Isabelle room to work, but it also gave Laughing Jack a front row seat to the whole spectacle. Jack watched with a big, unfading grin as Isabelle played her new game with the soiled corpse. Once Isabelle was all set up, she got to work. First, she dumped out the contents of her big black tool bag onto the work table behind her. An assortment of knives, hammers, pliers, and other tools was now laid out before her. Her first pick was a curved upholstery knife, which she used to carefully skin the body. The skin was then placed on racks to be stretched and turned into leather. Once that was put in place, Isabelle then used a handsaw to saw off the arms, legs, and head, disturbing the home of several families of maggots in the process. After filling the garbage can with bleach and other vile chemicals, she submerged the limbs until the meat was stripped from the bones. Isabelle fished the bones out of the soupy corpse juice and placed them on the work table. Then, in the cover of night, she brought the trash can outside and dumped the rotten remains into London's sewers to be swept away into the harbour. For the next 3 days, Laughing Jack watched with wonderment as the inspired Isabelle crafted the once human anatomy into a grotesque armchair abomination. The femur was made into the back legs of the chair, while the tibia, with the feet still attached of course, was made into the front chair legs. A wooden frame was used for the base and backing of the chair. However, the rim of the backing was crafted using the spinal column. The arm bones were used as the arms of the chair were fastened in place by some ribs. The now leathery flesh was sewn onto the seat and backing of the chair, and the golden blonde hair was braided into the lining of the base. Atop this armchair from Hal sat the skull that once belonged to the girl who had had golden blonde hair, the sapphire eyes, and the smile that could melt hearts. Isabelle was quite pleased with her work, and Laughing Jack too was impressed by his old playmate's profound creativity. After that night, Isabelle never touched another drop of alcohol again, for she now possessed a much more macabre thirst. In the following weeks, Isabelle made several improvements to her little workshop of horrors. She removed the mattress from the bed and put a row of thick wooden planks in its place, and then she fastened arm and leg restraints to the bottom and the sides. This would mean she would be able to entertain her guests for a longer period without them trying any rude escape attempts. Isabelle needed only one final thing before planning another grotesque party. She worked on it for a week straight, hand-carving it out of wood. After a coat of white paint was applied, Isabelle's creation was complete. It was a wooden mask resembling something one would wear at a Venetian masquerade ball. It had a furrowed brow and a long troll-like nose, and would allow her to strike fear in the hearts of her beloved guests. With her new face complete and the room transformed into a bloody murder nest, it was finally time for Isabelle Lee Grossman to bring home a new playmate. The following night, Laughing Jack watched as the masked Isabelle Grossman stomped up the stairs, carrying with her a large burlap sack, with her newest guest writhing within. She dumped the bag out on her torture bed, and out plopped a bound, gagged, and very frightened young boy, probably only 5 or 6 years old. Isabelle quickly undid the boy's bindings and held him down as she restrained his hands and feet to the steel bed frame. Tears streamed endlessly down the boy's helpless little face as Isabelle laid out her tools on the workbench. Isabelle returned, wielding a pair of rusty pliers, and wasting no time, she slid the bottom drawer of the pliers under the boy's fingernail on his right index finger and clamped it tightly. The child's eyes quivered as he began muttering through his gag, begging Isabelle to let him go. Isabelle smirked as she slowly bent the pliers backwards, painfully prying off the first fingernail. The boy screamed through his gag as he writhed in agony on the wooden boards, his finger beginning to gush with blood. Isabelle then moved on to the boy's middle finger, firmly grasping the nail with the rusty pliers. Once again she jerked the pliers back, but this time the nail only tore off halfway. The boy yelped in pain as his fingers twitched and shot with blood. Clamping the half-pried off nail, Isabelle gave it another yank. The nail tore off, but not without taking a good deal of skin tissue with it. Even Isabelle was a bit rebuffed by this painful sight, unlike the spy and Laughing Jack, who was cackling with joy at the disturbing action as he watched from within his old dusty box. Isabelle returned to the workbench and swapped the pliers for a large iron hammer. She then made her way to the foot of the torture bed, where with one hand she held down the boy's left leg. She raised the hammer high above her head as the boy cried and pleaded for mercy through his dirty gag. Then with all her might, Isabelle slammed the hammer down on the boy's bare kneecap, shattering the bone into gravel with a loud crack. The child convulsed in pain, with shrill screams muffling through the cloth gag tied tightly to his face. As the child struggled with intense pain, Isabelle placed the hammer down on the wooden bed and returned once more to the workbench, where she equipped herself with a long, sharp knife. Without delay, she began carving the words, "useless worm," into the child's quivering chest. When she finished, the boy was barely conscious. Isabelle knelt down and whispered into the boy's ear, "This is what happens to rotten children who make nasty faces at people." The child's eyes filled with tears one final time as Isabelle began to carve the skin off the boy's face. But to Isabelle's surprise, the boy still clung to life. The mutilated child just stared up at Isabelle with his big round eyes, which filled Isabelle's black heart with rage and hatred. "Even without a face, you're still an ugly little shit!" Isabelle shouted as she picked up the hammer from the foot of the bed and began to bash the poor boy's skull in. She smashed it over and over until it was nothing but a bloody, caved-in mass of flesh, pouring with thick red blood and oozing out chunks of brain matter. From across the room, Laughing Jack gleefully observed the grand finale, which had lived up to his expectations quite wonderfully. Isabelle's next guest was a blind old woman who she had invited over for some tea. It took her almost 5 minutes to realize the chair she was sitting on was crafted using human remains, and another 6 to find the stairs. only to topple down them, flailing and screaming like a loon. Isabelle decided to end the cruel joke there with a simple ice pick through her eye socket. After that, she brought over a little girl, whom she force-fed broken glass before using her stomach as a punching bag. As the weeks went by, more and more unlucky souls met their end with Isabelle Grossman's attic. And as the mad Grossman's personality became more dark and sadistic, Laughing Jack's personality followed suit while he rotted within his dusty box. Until one very cold December night. The rusty nails that were holding up the shelf of forgotten knickknacks finally gave way, and the whole thing plummeted to the ground. Isabelle heard the loud thud from downstairs and decided to climb up to the attic to investigate. She walked across the blood-stained wood floor of the attic, over toward the fallen shelf. Isabelle brushed aside some of the trinkets that broke in the crash. When she finally came across the jack-in-the-box from her childhood, Isabelle barely recognized the old tattered box as she picked it up and blew off some of the dust. Then, for whatever nostalgic reason, she decided to grasp the box's rusty clank and begin turning it. A horrible off-key Pop Goes the Weasel clanked from the worn-out old box, and as it reached its climax, Isabelle sung along with the final verse. Pop goes the weasel. The top of the box swung open, but nothing happened. It was empty. Isabelle expected as much, and she tossed the old box in the garbage with the other broken knickknacks. After the mess was cleaned up, she went to open the door to go back downstairs, but it was stuck. Isabelle pulled hard, but the door wouldn't budge. Just then, she heard the most horrible, raspy voice call out from behind her.
Isabelle.
A cold jolt ran down Isabelle's spine, and the hairs on the back of her neck stood straight up as she slowly turned around. All the way across the room by the garbage can stood the nightmarish Laughing Jack. He was completely monochrome. His mangled black hair hung down in twisted locks. Sharp, jagged teeth decorated his twisted grin, and his arms hung down like a rag doll with his grotesquely long fingers nearly scraping the floor. Then, with a bone-chilling, raspy voice, the fiendish clown spoke.
How nice it is to be finally free. Did you miss me, Isabelle?
Isabelle was paralyzed in fear. But I thought you weren't real, imaginary, Isabelle stuttered. Jack replied with a long, horrifying cackle.
Oh, I am quite real, kiddo. In fact, I've been waiting such a long time for this day to finally come, when I can play with my best friend for life. One last time.
Before Isabelle could reply, Jack's long arms stretched across the room and wrapped around Isabelle's legs. The twisted clown began pulling her closer, dragging her onto her own wooden torture bed as Isabelle's fingernails scraped along the floor. Ignoring the restraints, Jack swiftly grabbed 4 3-inch long iron nails from the workbench and pressed them straight through Isabelle's hands and feet, nailing her to the wooden torture bed. Isabelle growled in pain as she shouted at her captor. "Ah! Fuck you, goddamn clown-nosed freak!" Laughing Jack just chuckled as he forcefully held Isabelle's head in place, stating,
If you can't say something nice, then don't say anything at all.
Jack reached his long crooked fingers into Isabelle's mouth, firmly grasping her tongue and stretching out as far as it could go. The clown then reached back and grabbed a long sharp knife from the table, and slowly began to slice through the meat of Isabelle's tongue. Once lopped off, Isabelle's mouth began to overflow with blood. Jack responded by shoving a small cylindrical metal tube through Isabelle's throat to act as a temporary breathing hole. At this point, Isabelle was already in great pain, and had her eyes clenched shut to avoid seeing the sickening horrors that were being performed upon her body.
Come on, it's no fun if you don't watch.
Laughing Jack said playfully, but Isabelle kept her eyes tightly shut. Laughing Jack sighed.
Suit yourself.
Jack then forcefully held open one of Isabelle's eyes. He reached back with his big arm and took out some long, pointy fishing hooks from the workbench. Slowly, Jack pushed the sharp end of the hook through the top eyelid, straight through the bottom of the eyebrow and out of the top, permanently pinning it open. Then he took out the second hook, pushing it through the bottom eyelid and pinning it to the cheek. Jack repeated the process to the other eye. Before long, a series of sharp metal hooks made sure Isabelle didn't miss out on any of the action. Laughing Jack then took the same knife he'd used to lob off Isabelle's tongue and began to focus on the removal of Isabelle's lips. Jack carefully sliced 2 long strips of flesh off Isabelle's upper lip and lower mouth, causing her teeth and gums to be completely exposed.
Looks like someone hasn't been flossing regularly.
Laughing Jack cackled under his breath as he reached back and grabbed the hammer. Isabelle attempted to mutter some kind of beggar for mercy. However, only gurgled moans escaped her throat. Jack raised that hammer into the air, and with a twisted grin he slammed it down, giving off a loud crack as the iron hammer shattered Isabelle's teeth like brittle clay. Jack dropped the hammer and began to howl with laughter as he tore open Isabelle's shirt. Taking the sharpest knife, Jack cut straight down Isabelle's chest, all the way down past the stomach. Isabelle groaned with sharp stinging pain as the monochrome monster wormed his wretched fingers underneath the skin on Isabelle's chest, peeling it back as he was about to perform his horrible live autopsy. First, Jack began to pull out Isabelle's intestines in the same manner a magician would pull a series of colourful cloths out of his pocket. Then, after snipping off a small length of intestines, Jack pressed one end against his cold black lips and began blowing air into the foul organ. Once inflated, he twisted it up into the shape of a poodle, and with a loud chuckle exclaimed,
I can do giraffes too!
Isabelle remained still in pain and shock as the clown creature gently placed the macabre balloon animal beside Isabelle's head. For his next trick, Laughing Jack reached deep into Isabelle's open stomach cavity and yanked out one of her kidneys. Holding it in his hand, Jack turned to his captive friend and shrugged, stating that
Kidneys really aren't my thing.
Tossing the organ aside, Laughing Jack noticed that Isabelle was beginning to drift into death.
Feeling tired already? Why, we're nearly at the grand finale.
Laughing Jack exclaimed as he reached into his sleeve and pulled out a long adrenaline needle.
This ought to perk you right up.
Jack shouted as he slammed the needle into Isabelle's retina and injected the liquid into her right eye socket. Jack wiggled and twisted the needle further into his old playmate's eyeball, as Isabelle was reeled back into life to the feeling of a sharp needle scraping the back of her eye socket. With a sinister chuckle, Jack yanked the needle out, pulling the eyeball out with it. Isabelle's right eye now hung out of its socket by the eye stalk as it dribbled down the side of her face. Jack smirked.
Well, now that I have your full attention...
The insidious clown then took his long crooked index finger and poked a hole in Isabelle's stomach. Jack lowered his head down towards the open chest cavity and stretched his mouth wide open. Within seconds, a torrent of filthy cockroaches started crawling out of the clown's gullet, spilling onto Isabelle's open chest. Each vile roach crawled and pushed its way into the small opening in Isabelle's stomach, filling it from within, full of disgusting, writhing bugs. As her stomach became bloated with bugs, the roaches began to scurry up her throat, squeezing their way out of her mouth and nasal cavity. Isabelle was inches from death when her captor kneeled beside her and spoke into her ear.
It's been a blast, kiddo. But it looks like our time together is about up. No need for tears, though, because I plan to spread my friendship to all the lonely kids of the world.
And with that said, Laughing Jack reached into Isabelle's chest and yanked out her still beating heart. As her life bled out on that cold wooden bed, Isabelle's life flashed before her eyes. She saw her mother, her father, the boarding school, her victims, and the last thought that fluttered through her mind was of that very special Christmas where she woke up to find the beautifully hand-carved wooden box that contained her very first friend. There are rumours that when the police finally found Isabelle Grossman's rotten, maggot-infested corpse weeks later on Christmas Eve, that even though her face had been bashed and torn to bits, she almost looked happy.